I'm Judy, the athlete, and we're here to help you better your best.
Judy, given the state of things today, the world is changing, so many things are changing, our athletes aren't having the opportunities to compete like they always do. I just was thinking it would be helpful for maybe some of the athletes to listen to your story about the 1980 boycott when the U.S. did not go to the Olympics. And it was, I'm sure, a huge blow to the athletes. And I know you had to deal with it. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about that experience. I know in 1980 you were at the top of your shooting thus far, and you were in the running for a medal, so it had to be quite difficult to hear that there was going to be a boycott and you weren't going to be able to go. And I mean, what was the flood of emotions that you must have experienced?
Well, it's an interesting question because there were pretty much three phases to me of the boycott and the announcements. The first one was sort of this hint and threat to the Soviet Union to get out of Afghanistan. And if they didn't, the United States was going to make a boycott decision. There was the first decision in March that we're going to boycott, but I was young and I was probably in denial, and I felt like they're not going to boycott the Olympic Games. It only happens every 4 years. This can't possibly happen in the middle of my training. And so I continued to train because, first of all, there aren't a ton of tournaments back in the day, You had some big tournaments, but it's not like we had World Cups and things like that we could go to. So the Olympic trials itself was a big tournament, and I was preparing for it. So I went to the Olympic trials. I shot a personal best. I was the top person on the U.S. team. Everything that I had been working towards happened, and then 3 days later, they announced the final decision that we would not. The final decision being that we're not sending a team because we're not sending you any names, and that was the deadline to do it. So that pretty much blew up all of my denial at that point in time, and I had to deal with the fact that I wasn't going.
Oh man, that had to be tough, Judy. How did you respond? Did you, keep shooting? Did you take a break? Did you just take a few weeks to deal with it and figure out your next plan? What did you do next?
I'm pretty sure I didn't take a break at all. My coach and I had put together a plan the year before, and it looked at all of the tournaments, local tournaments, anything that I could go to. It looked at what kind of training plan I wanted to do from a cardio perspective, from actual shooting perspective, from mental perspective, and we put that all in place. And at this point, I was just curious to see, is it going to work, and what it's going to look like in July when I was supposed to be at the Olympic Games. And I also had a few national tournaments coming up, the Chinese National Championships, the Mexican National Championships, and the American National Championships. So to me, I was going to keep training.
Well, whatever you put together must have worked quite well, because after the announcement of the boycott, you went on and won the Mexican Nationals, the U.S. Nationals, and the Chinese Nationals. So how did you do that?
I was young, you're just like, just focused. I mean, that is one of the things people would probably say about me. I was very intensely focused, and I don't know, it's just each day at a time. And I think the other piece is I love to shoot arrows, so it wasn't like it was a sacrifice or anything like that. I love being out there shooting arrows.
Boy, that's a key component right there, because I'm sure a lot of our athletes also, they love their sport, and it's just hard when they can't compete. And you had to wait another 4 years for the Olympics. Yes, there would be other tournaments, I'm sure, along the way, but that's kind of the ultimate in many.
Yeah, 4 years is, living your life in quadrenniums is
right.
Pretty tough. And the one thing I'll tell you about that is that I did take that time I saw it as sort of a moment of truth of where am I in my archery, and I used that time to say, now's the time to try some new things, to test something new, to play with a different form, and see what would happen, and see if I could manage that. Play with some equipment. I think I tried some different bows and certainly some different companies, and it just gave me a chance to kind of say this is a new beginning.
Well, that's, I think, a great plan, actually, for our athletes as well, because in some cases they don't know when they're actually going to get to compete again. In other cases, like with the Olympics, we know it's a year away, but it is an ideal time to be creative, to learn new things about your sport that maybe you were curious about, to try new things that potentially can, because you don't have the tournaments, to be concerned about. So that's an ideal time to be doing that. How did the boycott influence perhaps what you were doing in terms of your shooting or how you prepared? Did it have an effect? Did you sit there and wonder if, are they going to do it again, or here I get all ready and it might not happen?
I don't think I speculated that way at all. How I would say that the boycott impacted me was a year later when I went to the World Championships. So remember, I said there's not lots of international competitions, and so it was a year later before I could go to an international competition. And I showed up at the World Championships in 1981, still shooting really, really well. And I ran into, standing out there, the woman who won the Olympics in 1980. And all I could think there was, I didn't get a chance to compete against you and to show you what I could do. And instantly what flooded me was, I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to come out here and I'm going to prove to you all that if I had been there, I would have gotten a medal. And boy, that was the beginning of the end, let me just tell you. That is probably the worst tournament I've ever shot in my life. I struggled so much with, it was the first appearance of target panic, of not being able to shoot the arrow, of, I literally had scorekeepers standing on my arrows that had missed the target. I was so frustrated, and frustration is such a bad place to be. And the next morning I would get up early and I would go out to the practice field and it was beautiful. I could do whatever I wanted to do. It's like, oh yeah, I'm back. And then as soon as they blew the whistle for me to prove who I was, wow, it did not go well at all. And I pretty much had to manage target panic the rest of my career.
That's a big effect from one tournament, but I think it happens to so many of our athletes. And the thing is, you said it very well, when you have to prove something, I think, to somebody else, or prove it for yourself that you ought to be at the top, then it doesn't create the energy that's going to allow you to shoot the way you'd like to shoot, So along the way, you must have learned some different techniques.
Well, I think I did along the way, and I that was probably my first foray into expectations are the thief of joy. Once I internalized that stuff from the external world of thinking I've got to prove to the world, and I let them take control of me, man, I was just a puppet that wasn't ready to really perform. And I can look back on it now, but I think one of the biggest things too that I think about that happened in the boycott was I got some advice of how to handle the boycott, right? And the advice that came to me was, be the consummate lady champion. Just take it in stride, rise above it, move forward, don't look back. And all that sounds really storybook wonderful, but at the end of the day, that's not who Judy Adams is. I don't even know what the consummate lady champion is. I have it in my head and I know what they were talking about, but it's not who I am. And it's probably the most inauthentic I have been in the sport, being something that I'm not. So
you attempted to be that person that you were advised to be, but it wasn't working for you.
No, because what Judy Adams was pissed off, right? Mm-hmm. I was not happy about what happened. I was disappointed. I was let down. I was probably a little bit lost. But instead of getting that out, I just, whatever consummate lady champion is, I just brought it all in and acted like, oh yeah, I can remember saying, I'm young. I got lots of Olympics. Archers last a really long time. But the reality is you're never 20 again, living at home, not worrying about rent, not worrying about schoolwork, not trying to figure out your future. It's never the same. And the fact that I didn't get that out.
Yeah, loss. It's loss, and that's the outside, proving it is the outside world piece of it. I mean, a lot of our athletes have an attitude of I'll show you, which I always thought you did also in your young years. That's different. That's very internal, and that's, something you put together from in here that is a motivator, and it's an intensity that I always remember from your shooting. And so, for each of these athletes to go through the stages of loss, anger being one of them, denial you already mentioned being another one, and you learn to deal with each aspect of it and move on, forward focus again. Yeah. So then came 84, and in 84, as I think you had mentioned to me, 3 of the 4 people that qualified in 80 did not qualify in 84. So that's tough. And the one person who did, Daryl Pace, went on to win the gold. So he had won the gold in 76. He missed 80. And then 84, he potentially could have had 3 gold medals back to back.
And I think the difference with Daryl is in the international world, Daryl had established himself, right? And the other 3 of us had not. So to some extent, it was our opportunity, our sort of party to show the world that we are, who we are. And so I think all of us were affected the same way because we didn't have that behind us, that credibility behind us. And not to take anything from Daryl. I mean, Daryl clearly is one of the greatest archers of all time.
Very interesting. So then another 4 years, there's 88 qualifying again, 92 qualifying. Judy, it was 16 years before 96 when you qualified again. How did you keep going, and what was different in 96?
Well, I actually didn't keep going. If you remember, I kind of retired after 92 and not making the team, and started a family, and it was you who came to me and said, do you want to be sitting on your front porch when you're, however many years from now, and will you regret that you didn't try one more time? And I think that was just the thing I needed. That and you telling me that, that's a goofy answer, Judy, you're not doing it because of your son and you need to be around or whatever else. She goes, you said you need to do this because of your son. And I think that clicked and made me sort of realize, who I am.
Yeah, well, you did very well in 96. You qualified first for the women again to go to the Olympics. And as I recall, it was a good experience, and you were planning to retire after, and you didn't retire again after the 96 Olympics. You kept going to 2000. It's always...
I don't know why.
You don't know why.
I'm not sure why. Sometimes it might just have been habit, and like I said, I enjoyed shooting. Mm-hmm. I think there was this other piece that I had been managing target panic, and sometimes I shot great, and sometimes I just didn't shoot well, and I think there was something inside of me that wanted to conquer it.
Right, yeah. That attitude can be very helpful, that's for sure, because you have to use your conscious brain to overcome it anyway and to get past it. So that attitude is very important, and determination and all of those things. And I'm glad to hear it comes and goes. That's exactly right. And the more you practice, the more you can be on top of it and in charge and make a difference in it. So I remember asking you along the way from 96 to 2000, Judy, why do you shoot? And it took a very long time for you to kind of figure that piece out. If I remember right, you can correct me. I think you mentioned that it provided something in your life that wasn't fulfilled any other way besides competing in archery. You had your good job, you had your family, you had many good things going, but it's like there would have been a hole in you if you hadn't had the archery competition.
Well, if I think through the years that I competed, which was for a pretty long time, it is the one place in my life where I was in charge.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't, I got to make the rules. I got to do what I wanted to do. And that might be why the target panic was so compelling for me, because how do I take charge in this situation in my happy place, the place where I can be me?
Well, that's piece of gold right there. The fact that you can compete and be yourself. And if there was one thing to pass on to our athletes, I think today it would be to continue to be you and do things your way and stay in charge. And whenever they let you compete again, when you get that great opportunity, do it.
And it's interesting when I look back on that and I think about the work you and I are doing now with Better Your Best, and I think about our 5 success indicators. I would tell you they had such a beginning in this process. I think about the authentic piece, right, and not being authentic and not getting that anger and craziness out. I think about being forward focused and not looking back and being able to just keep moving forward. I think about the courage it took me to get on the line sometimes when I'm not even sure if I'm going to be able to shoot the arrow, much less where is it going to go. Just those kinds of things. And then really, if I look at that whole thing, it was such an adventure. Sometimes good and sometimes bad. But when it was good, it's because I connected. And that is another reason I shoot. It's that feeling of that energy when you're in charge of it, you're connected, and you see the outcome that you pretty much programmed yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Judy, for sharing your story, and hopefully it'll give some ideas and inspiration to some of our athletes out there who are waiting to compete.